Okay, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us this morning. I'm Michael Sencham. I'm the brand manager for Yamaha at AMA Technology. I'd just like to start by thanking Yamaha Australia for their support in organising this webinar. And I'd also like to thank everyone for taking the time out of their busy schedules to join us today. So today we'll be covering the ADECIA family of products. We're going to be discussing some of the firmware updates, introducing new products, and exploring some of the Q-SYS certification as well. So joining us on the call today from Yamaha, we've got Dale Moore from the marketing manager. We've also got FC Wong, the commercial audio sales manager, and Mark Lapthorne, who's the product manager and technical specialist at Yamaha Australia, who will also be presenting today. Please refrain from asking questions during the presentation. There will be ample time in a Q&A session at the end, but there is actually a Q&A button up the top. So if you leave all your questions in that section, I can go through them at the end and we'll address those accordingly. As a special thank you for joining us as well, we're also going to be giving away a CS800 and I'll be emailing the winner after the call. So thanks again for everyone for being here, and let's get started, and I'll hand it over to Mark Lapthorne at Melbourne Yamaha HQ. Thanks, Mark.
Great, thanks for that, Michael. So yeah, welcome everybody. Thanks for giving us your time this morning to go through some of the Yamaha Unified Communications range. So we're going to walk you through a bit of the product and a bit of the use cases and some applications for the entire range of Yamaha Unified Comms in the ADECIA family. So you can see we've got a bit of product here. So some props so we can walk through some of the things that we're talking about in real time. So as I mentioned, we're going to, fix my clicker. You can click back on the presentation for me. Sorry, slight hiccup. There we go. So in the Yamaha Unified Communications range, we've actually got three families of products. So the ADECIA, which we're going to be talking about today, our USB speakerphone range, and our video collaboration bars. So as Michael mentioned, CS800 on the bottom there of the final pillar. We'll be giving one of those away to a participant today as well, so you can get some hands-on time with the product. So like I mentioned, we're going to focus on ADECIA today specifically and cover all of these products in the family one by one, so we get to learn what application we might use what product in. So starting off, the RMCG, that's sort of the family leader of the product range. So microphone here sitting next to me, quite a sizable product. It's probably hard to tell scale from your tiny little postage stamp square there on your screens, but ceiling grid microphone that's dynamic beam forming. So 4 simultaneous beams from a single microphone, so you can pick up 4 individual talkers at the same time. So if people are talking over the top of each other, it's obviously not a great start, but this microphone will actually pick them up individually and relay them to the other end as clear as possible. Within that, you also get exclusion and focus zones that you can set up on your pickup area. So the microphone itself doesn't require any setup to do the beam forming. It turns on and it's active out of the box, but you can also ask it to not cover a particular area or focus on a particular area, which is very useful in certain circumstances. All the DSP is built in. And there's quite a lot of processing on this microphone as well. So not only the dynamic voice tracking and beam forming, you've also got your echo cancellation, de-reverberation, de-noise, automatic gain control, EQ. The list is pretty extensive. You've also got 3 options to mount the microphone. So a traditional flush mount in the ceiling. There's also VESA mount bracket support on the back of the microphone, and also wire mount. So depending on your ceiling configuration, you've got an option to mount this microphone in whatever type of design you've got in the room you're working in. Moving on to our tabletop microphone. So these are a wired tabletop microphone. So again, black and white here in front of me. PoE powered, like the RMCG, the ceiling microphone, all Dante audio transport as well, I should mention. So single cable connection for power and audio transport and all of your control. Again, dynamic voice tracking on this, but you can also set a particular type of pickup pattern. So you've got 6 pickup patterns that can be selected per microphone. So if you've got multiple microphones deployed, you can select what type of pickup pattern you want them to have for that particular application, but also just leave them in dynamic voice tracking mode as well, if that's the preference. Again, you've got ample DSP all built into the microphone, so the audio stream out the other end is fully processed and ready to go. And it comes with a fixed table bracket, so hole through the table for your cable to pass through, and then the microphone twists and locks into place, so it won't go anywhere. It'll stay where you intended it to stay. So here's an example of the pickup patterns that this microphone will do. So omnidirectional, toroidal, cardioid. So you've got all those options on top of the dynamic voice tracking. One in particular of note, toroidal is quite a useful function if you've got noisy products above the microphone's pickup area. So where an omnidirectional might pick up, say, a projector directly overhead or maybe an air conditioning unit, toroidal will cut out some of that noise directly overhead, which can be really useful. But then you've also got specific pickup patterns for potentially just having one person at the end of the table, but they might be a little bit far away. You can put it on a hypercardioid, for example, just to focus in on an individual talker. We've also got, fairly new to the range, is the ADECIA wireless product. So we've got a wireless WAP here. So they come in 8 and 16 channel versions to connect up to 8 or 16 microphones. Again, PoE powered Dante audio transport, and all the DSP is built into the WAP. So again, all of that echo cancellation, de-reverberation, all ready to go. Comes with a fixed wall bracket, and the case is paintable as well, so it can blend into your environment. Sitting next to that, I've got the charging dock, which has got 8 ports on it. It will charge any microphone in any configuration. So you can see I've got a full board here of microphones, and regardless of whether it's a gooseneck or a puck style microphone, they all fit in any of the spots, which is really helpful. One of the best things with the charging dock is not only does it keep your microphones all charged up and ready to go for your meetings, but it also enables batch pairing. So rather than have to go through and pair one microphone at a time, if you're doing 16 microphones, for example, if you've got 2 charging docks, you can pair them all at once. You don't have to go through and do them one at a time, but then you also can do batch firmware updates as well. So all the firmware versions do have to match between the WAP, the charger, and the microphones. So having a charging dock where that can be pushed all in one big batch is really time-saving and really convenient. So as I mentioned, 4 types of microphones. We've got the long gooseneck and short gooseneck microphone models. So 20 hours battery life, all operating on the 1.9 gigahertz band in the DECT range. On the gooseneck microphones, you get an indicating ring for mute status by the microphone head, and there's also a mute indicator and button on the body of the microphone. They do support charging via USB-C if you don't have a charging dock, so they can still be used and charged without it. And that charging cable can actually be operated while the microphone's in use as well. So even though you've got a 20-hour battery life, if you forget to charge your microphone or you've just had that many meetings in a row, the microphone can still be operated with the USB-C cable plugged in, so it will keep you up and going. And actually, as a bit of a current promotion that we're running, we're actually offering a free battery with every single wireless microphone as well. So you get a spare backup battery with every one. So it is a replaceable battery, which is also very good. So eventually, after years of service, if your battery gets a little bit low on life, you've got a spare one that you can easily change in. It's just a battery cover and pop it in. So we've also got, like I mentioned, the puck style microphones, so both in omnidirectional and directional. So cardioid and omnidirectional. Again, 20 hours of battery life, still operating on that DECT band. So the brains, I guess, of the operation is the RMCR. So this is your way in and out of your PC that's running your meeting client of choice. So be that Teams, Zoom, or even WebEx. You can use the RMCR as a USB interface into your computer, and it also interacts with all of your other legacy or existing equipment that you might have in a room. So again, PoE powered, so single cable, all your Dante audio and power comes down the one line. Does support Bluetooth and VoIP with the SIP protocol, USB, as I mentioned, and analog audio in and out as well. Everything is set up via a web GUI, and there's actually a quick start wizard as well. So within 5 clicks, you can detect all of your devices that are connected and powered up, assign them to a role, have left and right speakers as well if you're using left and right speakers, and then do an automatic room tuning calibration, all within the space of about 2 minutes. So really quick and easy to get up and running with the RMCR and your chosen microphone and speakers. So there are options to mount it as well, either under the table with a bracket or in rack mount as well, depending on what the finish is going to be in the room. Should mention as well that this is a 16 by 16 audio interface on Dante. So that means that you can have up to 15 microphones realistically, because you do need one of those outputs for AEC reference. So 16 in, 16 out. So you can have, 16 microphones, 16 speakers off a single processor, which is quite a lot for most applications. So as I mentioned, the speakers as well, we do have PoE powered Dante line array speakers. These look very smart, mounted next to a flat panel in a room. They're quite low profile, they're only 50 millimeters wide. They do come with a fixed wall mounting bracket included in the box, but there's also a multitude of other additional brackets that are available for purchase. And they do have a paintable grille and cabinet, so you can blend them into the decor of the room again. So mainly tuned for voice reproduction. They're still fine for a little bit of music, but that's not their primary focus. Their primary focus is making sure speech is relayed nice and clearly as possible. We've also about to release a ceiling speaker. So again, PoE powered Dante audio in a ceiling speaker, so VXC 2P. We're looking at around $1,200 to $1,400 when it's launched. That'll be confirmed closer to the time. We're expecting these about September, October, so not too far away. There will be a couple on display at Integrate. If you happen to be in town for that, you can come and have a look and a listen to them. So that's another option for your speakers in a system if you want just ceiling mount, or maybe you've got quite a long room where you need to fill in the back rows. There's another option there again. As I've said, all single cable connections. So everything's plugged in to the switch, PoE powered Dante audio for every single device. Speaking of switches, we do the switch as well. So SWR 231110 P10G. So it's a PoE plus supporting switch with a 240 watt max PoE output. Again, it's got rack mount options for it, but it is also seamlessly integrated into the RMCR if you're running the latest firmware. So you can set up Dante optimization or verify your Dante optimization easily through the web interface, and also set up radius security with a couple of clicks. So they've really integrated all these products quite tightly into each other so that they work as a whole family. So out of the box, the switch is optimized for Dante audio transport already. So it's a really good solution for not only delivering good quality PoE, but also having that Dante optimization. Your audio is going to work the way it's intended to work. There is also announced recently a new control button coming. So this is going to be released probably a month after the PoE speaker that I just mentioned. So probably October-ish, possibly November. Looking at around $700 to $800 for this. Again, PoE powered, so there's a bit of a theme going on today, but it is a multi-function button. So it can be used as a mute for your microphones, especially if you've got a ceiling microphone and you don't have direct access to your Teams or Zoom client where you can mute yourself in software. Having a hardware button to mute yourself is very handy. It could also be set up as a mute group control. So you can control a bunch of wireless microphones, for example, or tabletop microphones. And then it can also be used as a preset recall button. So if you've got room combining, which we'll discuss a little bit later, it can be used to recall those different configurations. So it can be just sat on your table, or there is a wall mount for it as well, which is paintable again. So it can blend in with your room. So as I mentioned, you've got those three modes of operation, and to differentiate what they're doing, the actual LED ring changes its color. So in this default mode, just a standard mute and unmute, but as I said, you've got those room divide combine options, and then also your group muting settings as well. So just to talk about control briefly about ADECIA, we've got sort of three in-house options to control these systems. You can, of course, use third-party control. There's a full API available for all of the ADECIA products, so you can If you've already got a control system or you're looking at putting in a control system, still control it that way. But we do give you the option of this new button that's coming out. So for a simple mute, unmute, basic preset recall, we've also got our ProVisionaire series of software, so you can control your entire audio system with an iPad or a Windows PC. And just actually recently released iPhone is now available for ProVisionaire. And we've also got a touch panel MCP1 that you can use to control your system as well. So there's a few different options there for built-in. So just because we're dealing with a bit of wireless stuff, I thought it was important to go into some detail on some of the specifics with the wireless ADECIA system. So those of you who are familiar with DECT probably don't need a scrub up on this, but it's been a while for a lot of people that this technology's sort of been in wide use. So I thought we'd go over some of the specifics as well. So talking about the 4 microphone options we've got, there's sort of 2 camps that you can fall into in terms of your choice. So how you might go about choosing a microphone for your application. You've got 1 microphone per talker or 1 microphone for multiple talkers. And the reasons you might use one or the other are covered here. So if you're close to the microphone, you can use a short gooseneck. It also stays out of the line of the cameras a little bit better than a long gooseneck. If you're far away, you might need a long gooseneck, or if it's an important talker as well. So maybe an executive or a CEO gets a long gooseneck while everyone else gets a short one, that type of thing. Or, you know, keeping the microphone count down. If you've got a big boardroom that you need to cover, maybe it's directional or omnidirectional microphones. So again, depending on whether they're far or close to the microphone and how many people you want to sort of cover with a particular microphone, there's options there for you. And there's no issues mixing microphones in individual systems as well. So you can have a combination of any of them in a single system. So talking about DECT using the 1.9 gigahertz band. So as we know, 2.4 gigahertz is basically unlicensed territory, and there's a lot of stuff going on in there. So not to mention, you know, Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, as well as other industrial equipment. So it can get pretty hairy in those bands if you're not careful. So the great thing with DECT is that it's a licensed band. It's fairly clean these days. There's not a lot going on in there because most people have given up using cordless phones, which is what this technology was originally developed for. So it's a specific wireless communication protocol, which is great because that's exactly what we are trying to do here. So within the WAP itself, it actually has a wireless environment scan, which I recommend you do that before you set anything up. You can plug your WAP in just into your switch and log into it. And run a scan. So you can actually leave this running for multiple hours and it will record all that data for you in a CSV file, but it also gives you a visual representation on the screen of what your channel count is looking like. And that will help you determine how many microphones you can realistically operate within that wireless environment. So a good thing with this is if you've got a large space that you're trying to cover, it might not be all in one system. It might be multiple systems within the same space. There's likely to be some crossover between your wireless environment, between WAPs. So this can tell you, you know, if you're going to deploy 50 microphones, for example, that you'll be able to do that without too much trouble. So run a scan, let it run for a little while so you get a full picture of the wireless environment, and then you'll get a good update on what's realistically possible with this system. So talking about wireless a little bit further, you've got multiple transmission strengths, so RF power levels that you can set on the WAP. So by default, it's set to full, but you can put that down to high, medium, or low. We generally recommend leaving it on full, which I'll discuss some of the ways that the DECT works together with neighbouring wireless clients in a moment. But full gives you that capability of making sure you're going to cover your room well. So about 50 meters transmission distance on full, which is quite a long way. So the only thing to consider is whether or not you've got WAPs directly in neighbouring rooms that may start impeding on each other. You might then look at lowering that power down a little bit. So a little bit of good practices with the wireless equipment. So distance between a WAP and a microphone in use should be a minimum of 2 meters. So you can actually oversaturate the signal. So we don't want a signal so powerful that the microphone gets saturated, because that will affect your performance. And in between microphones, it should be about 20 centimeters. So microphones connected to the same WAP, 20 centimeters, 2 meters from the WAP. WAPs themselves should be 2 meters apart, and any other microphones connected to that second WAP should be 2 meters from any other microphone. So sort of stick to those rules and you'll make sure you've got the best deployment possible. So as I mentioned, the WAPs themselves, as part of the DECT technology, can work with each other in the same wireless environment. And typically there's not a problem doing that, but if you're doing high channel count deployments, what you might find, if you have a look at figure 1, we've got this sort of overlapping of our carriers and slots. So carriers being your channels basically, and slots being the particular wireless time in that channel. So when you start smearing those across one another, that can reduce your channel count. So it's not necessarily going to affect your performance on that particular system, but if you've got lots of microphones you need to try and deploy in one space, it can affect your total channel count. So we have an option to synchronize the DECT together. So the clocks of all of the WAPs will get synchronized. So then, the figure 2 is a more realistic representation of what will happen. So all of those carriers and slots are being transmitted at the same time, and that enables you to maximize your channel count within the same space. So that's just a tick box within the setup of the WAP. You enable synchronization on all the devices that are going to be within the same wireless environment to one another. And one of those devices becomes the clock leader effectively, and they all lock into one another. So I mentioned some new features in version 2.5 of the firmware, and there's some really great stuff in here. I sort of covered them a little bit already, but I just wanted to go over them in a little bit more detail for you as well. So this is sort of the headline stuff that we've added in 2.5, which has been really well received. So dividing and combining rooms is now much easier to set up and recall in the presets. External device control, which is really important, especially in meeting rooms where all of your technology is not necessarily from the one brand. And that leads into a little bit of the control options that I talked about as well. That easy security setup with radius settings on your switch and your processor. So that's now a configuration file that you drop in, and it's literally 3 clicks and you can get all of your access rights set up almost immediately. Much easier to use RMW, so the wireless equipment through the RMCR. There's more integration between those devices now, and that long-running wireless environment scan was new for this version as well. Easier setup of the speakers, so now all the firmware and Dante firmware on those units can be updated all as one when you're doing the 2.5 update. And I mentioned that provisionaire control, so we've got some templates set up for room dividing, combining, and also dialer for VoIP calls if you're implementing VoIP as well in your systems. So a quick run through of how the room divide combine wizard works. So it first will ask you to draw out your room layout, so how many rooms you've got, and it can be up to 4 rooms that we can work with here. You then allocate all the devices to each room as an individual space, and then you create room layouts. So if you're linking room A to room B, you decide what devices will be active for that particular functionality, and you repeat that for all of your spaces that you're going to link or that you potentially will link, and that creates your preset list for you. So once you've got your preset list, that can all be saved and named, and then you've got something to recall when those configurations happen. So then we can pop them in our provisionaire control software. So this is the design software. This is the template that I mentioned. So you've got an easy to use out of the box preset recall on an iPad or a Windows machine. And you can deploy that same kind of look and feel of control system across multiple different installs as well. So once you've got a basic configuration that you're happy with, all you have to do is make sure all of your devices are assigned correctly. So it's quite easy to reuse the same design over and over again once you've got one that you like the look of. Talking about external device control, So traditionally, like I mentioned, you might have a third-party control device. When you power the system on, that'll turn on your display. Maybe it closes the blinds or turns the lights to a particular value. Sets your camera to a preset. So all of that traditionally would have had to have been done with a third-party control device. So now we can do a lot of that on the RMCR itself. So you can have up to 10 control sets with up to 30 commands per control set in the RMCR, all just IP-based control. So if you've got an IP control protocol for a particular device, there's a fair chance we can control it built in. So you can link that to preset recalls as well, and have the system sort of control your whole space for you without the need to put in another product that you then have to program. So a bit of a crazy flow chart here of how that might work. So we've got a MCP1 on the wall there. You press a button on that to recall a preset. That then goes and turns all your devices on, including all your external devices. So tells your cameras to go to a preset, turns your projector on, drops your screen, does all of those nice things for you. And then you can do the reverse on the other end of it as well. So all running off the one conference processor. So as I mentioned at the start, we've got quite a multitude of case studies of places around the world that have implemented this technology. I think probably one of my favourites is that Northern Alberta Institute of Technology, a really interesting application for conferencing technology like this. So they installed an RMCG in a medical training facility. So they run scenarios in like a hospital situation, and there's a control room controlling the mannequin to make it react in certain ways. And what was really important for them was to be able to hear the students in that environment, while the pressure is on, so they can react as quickly as possible to make the mannequin do what they need it to do to put the students through their paces. So the previous system they had picked up a lot of background noise, and sometimes it was difficult to understand what the people were saying. They upgraded to an RMCG and were really happy with the results. So an interesting application of the technology, but a really great outcome for the customer as well. So briefly, I think Michael mentioned some of our collaboration partners, and particularly the Q-SYS certified technology partner now. So if there's guys out there using Q-SYS, there is a plugin available for that now to work with the ADECIA range. But we've also got Zoom and Teams certification, and Cisco. We've got collaboration with Ava cameras so that we can do preset recalls, so you can track speakers and lock in on positions based on who's actually talking, and ScreenBeam and Barco as well for wireless integration of technology where you don't have to run USB cables across your room. So there's quite a broad spectrum of different companies that we're working with in the conferencing space, and this list is sort of growing every day as we work with more and more people. So that's it for the official sort of presentation side of this. I think we're going to open it up now for some questions. Anything you've got that you want to know more about, drop it in the Q&A. I think Michael's going to read those out, and whoever's best positioned to answer those, we'll let you know how we can answer those questions for you. So thanks very much for your time, guys.
Great, thanks, Mark. That was a great presentation and some really exciting developments from ADECIA. So yeah, I'd encourage you. We do have a bit of time left on the call, so I'd encourage you to put some questions in the Q&A section if you have any. I'll just start with one from Dan Lorello, who's our technical specialist for UC at Amber. He's just asked, can you please explain the difference between auto voice tracking and bidirectional or toroid on the tabletop mics?
Yeah, cool. Great question, actually. So the auto voice tracking works similar to how the RMCG works, where it's looking for voice activity to focus on. So in the tabletop microphones, there's actually 4 microphone elements. So, all sort of 90 degrees apart. They're all active at the one time, sort of looking for the direction that speech is coming from. So a sort of traditional kind of beamforming arrangement where it will look for speech and focus on that particular area. So there is an auto mixer built into the microphone itself, and it blends those 4 capsules together to focus in on a particular direction. So it's kind of a 360-degree specific direction kind of pickup pattern. And omnidirectional, all 4 of those elements are just active at the same gain level. So you're getting sound from any different position coming into the microphone. Bidirectional, for example, or figure 8, which is probably more traditionally called, it will only hear from 180 degrees apart. So you're only hearing from either side of the microphone. Interestingly, depending on the configuration you set it up on, the mute indicators change their state as well, so you know which way to face the microphone. So those other types of layouts, I guess the best way to describe them is they have specific pickup areas they're looking at working with, but they're always kind of live to those sides, whereas the voice tracking will try and minimize the noise by looking for a speaker as such. So they work a little bit differently. I think the voice tracking is probably the most useful general purpose option, which is why it's the default. But there are some arrangements where you might want to use Omni, for example, because you've got lots of people around a single microphone and you're not too worried about noise, those sorts of things. I should actually mention, which I think I forgot at the start as well, Michael, that I'm coming to you today from an RMCG in one of our meeting rooms here at Yamaha. So if you're happy with the way it sounds on your end, I hope you are. I always get good reports from it, but that's what it sounds like on the far end. So that's one of the best examples and demos that we can do with this technology, is to actually use it in a call. Yeah, so I forgot to mention that off the top. So yeah, just wanted to throw that in there at the end.
No worries. Thanks, Mark. That was one of the questions. Also, I'd just like to ask as well, how does ADECIA handle challenging acoustic environments? So say if you're in an open office or a large conference room, you know, that you've got lots of options to choose from with the mic configurations, how would you go about assessing a challenging situation like that?
Yeah, another good question. So the approach would be different depending on the challenge you're trying to overcome, I suppose. So large conference rooms, sometimes they're not necessarily the best acoustically treated. Sometimes they're more form over function, shall we say. So that can be challenging. And the best approach for something like that is to make sure you've got the shortest possible distance that your voice has to travel before it hits a microphone. So that might mean deploying a couple of microphones in a space that's particularly reverberant to get the best possible result. The microphone itself will handle reverberant spaces quite well. We used to have one set up in our piano showroom, which was quite a large space. It was a little bit reverberant, and you can get quite a long way away from it and still be quite clearly heard. So it does handle that particularly well in terms of removing the reverberation noise from the room. But it's not going to sound as good as this, for example. So this is a reasonably sized room. I think it's about 6 by 8. So, you know, you could probably argue we need 2 in this room, but I've just put a single one in and it does a really good job in here. So I guess there's always that argument to be had of how good do you want it to be? It's going to be significantly better than the built-in microphone on your laptop, or perhaps a cheap option from you know, your general tech store. But you can go a long way and get a really good, almost studio quality result by deploying the microphones carefully based on the room acoustics. That's slightly different to open space configurations where you might need to use the exclusion zone functionality. So because the microphone is designed to hunt down human speech, so we have this technology called human voice activity detection. So that's specifically what the microphone is looking for, is human voice. it will target that. So if you've got people in the background talking and you think, oh, they won't affect the meeting because they're 8-9 meters away, it will pick them up. It will look for them, it will pick them up. So you do need to create that exclusion zone so that it doesn't look for those people and so that it focuses in on your meeting area. So that's where that exclusion and focus zone really comes into its own, so that you can just focus on the people that are supposed to be in that space. But generally, you don't need to do any specific setup unless you've got a particular case like that where you're trying to achieve a particular result.
Okay, great. Thanks, Mark. I've just got a few more questions coming in. One from Don Goldstein. Hi, Don. I hope you're well. Is there a width control on the auto voice tracking?
No, there isn't. So that's sort of determined by the auto gain control in the microphone. So there's no limitation on how far it will sort of look for a voice, but there is the point of diminishing returns as well. So that's why layout, microphone position is still important. You can't sort of just put them wherever you like ad hoc. They do need to be considered because the microphone will try and pick up as much speech as it possibly can. So in the case of, say, the tabletop microphones, when they run into the RMCR, there's an auto mixer inside here. So the microphones itself may, 2 or 3 microphones may pick up the same person speaking because that's what they're supposed to do. But the RMCR will prioritize the one with the best signal to noise ratio so that the clearest speech will come through. So I guess in order to keep them as simple as possible to deploy in terms of settings, there's no control over how far or not they will pick up, but it's more about making sure you are deploying them appropriately for that space. So there are still some considerations in that.
Yep. Okay, great. I've also got a question from Luke about adaptive voice lift. How does the adaptive voice lift function work with when RMCG is paired with the VX C2P, which is the new ceiling
speaker? Yeah, so there is a secondary output channel on the RMCG. So that's what we call our low latency output. So that doesn't have any of the additional processing chain in it that your normal output for conferencing would have. So the only thing it does is the dynamic beam tracking, and then it goes straight out, so it's as low latency as possible. So again, there is some careful consideration to be used with the positioning of that and who you're trying to voice lift. And then it's a case of basically setting up a DSP with effectively a mix minus sort of situation. So the speakers closest to the person speaking will be dimmed or turned off altogether. Because the person speaking is close to the people around them, they don't really need the reinforcement. And then the people further away need them. So the speakers progressively get louder the further away you are from the microphone. So that's sort of the general principle of it. That's not handled by the microphone itself. That does need to be set up in your DSP of choice. So you can't actually use the RMCR for that because it is a fixed architecture specifically for conferencing. So you would need to use something else. But that's the basic principle behind doing the adaptive voice lift with the RMCG.
Okay, great. We've also got a question from Adrian. Is ADECIA able to handle input peripherals outside of audio? And also, second to that, how does it work within a bring your own device and BOYM environment with sharing and local PC or Android devices?
So there's no additional peripheral connections for it. So it is just an audio processor. So a lot of that other technology, so bring your own device sort of things, would require an additional piece of hardware. So I mentioned the Screen Beam and Barco collaboration, so ClickShare. You can actually plug the RMCG into a second gen ClickShare or a current gen Screen Beam, and then just use the supplied dongle for those to basically get the connection from your RMCG to your device. So if you're bringing your own device, say you don't have a meeting room client in that room, and then your other device connection would be the traditional way to do it. So it's not in the domain of the RMCR. So yeah.
Okay, great. Great question from Michael about the partnership with Q-SYS. Will your partnership with Q-SYS enable the RMCG to support camera speaker tracking using QSC cameras?
I believe that's the idea. So the collaboration is to process the beam location information that the microphone spits out. So the idea behind that is that you could then use Q-SYS to do your camera tracking. So yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think that's going to be a bit of a game changer. You know, having Q-SYS on board, it's becoming a gold standard of DSP in the industry. So it's pretty exciting.
Absolutely.
So great question, Michael. We've got another question from Ken on the back of Don Goldstein's question. Would it be safe to say you could set up an exclusion zone? So Don's question was, is there a width control on the audio auto voice tracking? And would it be safe to say you could set up an exclusion zone?
On the RMTT, so the tabletop microphones, there's no exclusion zone on those. So the exclusion zone's only available on the RMCG, but that would work as a way of trying to reduce noise coming into the meeting space. Yes. So yes and no, I guess, to that question. Yeah.
Okay, great. So I think that's all the questions we have in the chat at the moment, unless there are any more questions. Here's one that's coming from Adrian. Are you working with other control partners such as RTI, or is QSC about it for the moment?
So the QSC partnership's only new, so never say never. There's nothing sort of announceable at the moment, but we're always looking to collaborate with other manufacturers where we can, particularly in this space. So yeah, nothing to sort of mention just yet, but there's no reason why in the future that can't be something.
Right, and I think with the help of RTI being an Amber brand, with the help of our TSS team, I'm sure we could make something work, Adrian. So great question. Also, probably a question for the attendees. Just wondering if there's any installation process or technical capability questions that you'd like to ask while we've got Mark on the call. I know that every environment is different, and there's a bunch of different ways that you can install the ceiling mics. I'd just like to throw that out to the audience if there's any questions on installation process. And there may not be, Mark, but that's okay. And maybe if you could just talk quickly about the three different types of installation processes for the RMCG in particular.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the main, I guess, installation method would be cut a hole in the ceiling, whether that be a tile or a plaster ceiling. There's quite a substantial bracket and ring and things like that come with it all. Basically installs like a ceiling speaker would, so you've got 4 quick turn latches on the underside. So that's a pretty quick and easy job to do. Comes with a really accurate cutout template as well, which is nice because it is a slightly odd-shaped hole. It's got a couple of lobes on it. And once it's up in the roof, it's actually got anti-fall tabs and things like that. So if you do, have an accident and you lose grip of the microphone, it's not just going to come falling out of the ceiling, which is really helpful. And also safety-wise and things like that all included in the box. So quite a comprehensive set of tools to get the job done. Wire mount is probably the next one I talk about because that's what we've got here in our meeting room. So we've got exposed ceilings here. So you can see all the sprinkler system and all that kind of stuff going on. And that's just M6 eye bolts. There's 4 spots on the microphone to mount those. And there's all the specs that you need in the installation guide, which is either in the box or on the website. So you put your eye bolts in, mount your anchors to the ceiling and drop some cable from it. So again, pretty straightforward and easy option. And then the VESA bracket. So realistically, that's kind of a bit of a combination situation. You might have a really high ceiling, whether it's a finished ceiling or unfinished ceiling, that you can drop basically a projector pole from and put a VESA bracket on that. So there's just I think it's a 100 by 100 on the back for your bracket. So yeah, screw your screws in and off you go. So I guess the importance of the cable and the VESA mount installation options are when you've got really high ceilings. So if you're not going to protrude on anything else going on in the room, so you're not going to cast a shadow on the projector or, you know, be in front of a light or something like that, ideally you want to get the microphone down as close as possible to the participants. So the default ceiling height in the system is 3.5 meters. So that's kind of a really good target range to aim for. So having those options where you can mount it alternatively are helpful for getting the microphone right into the meeting space.
Yeah, fantastic. Also, we've got another question from Adrian Barrett about the speakers. So can you use other speakers? Is there profiles for other Yamaha products? Is there low profile options, or do you need to suspend when you have low cavities? And also, does the ceiling cavity or hanging below a ceiling affect anything, i.e. acoustics, etc., with the system that needs to be checked? Does that make sense, Mark?
I think so. There was a lot in that.
Yeah.
So I'd probably just clarify if you mean hanging the microphone or hanging the speakers, like pendant style speakers. But in terms of the other options for speakers, you can use whatever you like. There's no restriction. There is an analog speaker output on the RMCR, and you can also patch the Dante manually to whatever other Dante receiver you like. So those options are available. I guess the only downside with doing that is you lose the quick start auto Dante patching, auto setup type of thing. So Yamaha, to my knowledge, is still the only manufacturer that can patch Dante on the device itself, so you don't need to pull out Dante controller. So having the Yamaha speakers that the system recognizes makes it really easy to do all the patching and get that all set up. You can still do the auto room tuning with third-party speakers, so that's not a problem either. So be that either via Dante or via analog. So yeah, there's not really any restrictions in what speakers you can use. In fact, in this installation here, while we are using an RMCR, it's actually not doing the audio out into the room. We already had an existing system in here, so we are running out Dante into another Yamaha Dante system that is not supported by the built-in patching. So manual patch, run the auto room setup, auto room tuning, and away you go. So, and these are pendant speakers as well. So yeah, there's the options for that are basically whatever you find appropriate for that space.
Yeah, great. Also, another question from Don. Can wired desktop microphones integrate with ADECIA? So there's the 3 types of microphones configurations available. It's a great question. How do they integrate together, and can they?
Yeah, so I'll talk to that, but I also will mention something else. So yeah, so you can use any combination of microphones you like, as long as you don't go over that 16 count. So if you wanted to have a couple of tabletops and a ceiling grid, that's fine. If you wanted to have a couple of tabletops and some wireless gear, that's fine as well. So there's no restriction in mix and match within the ADECIA range. Something I didn't mention earlier, which is the RMCR has actually got 2 analog microphone inputs on the front as well. Yeah. So you can run traditional microphones or third-party microphones into the front as well. The inputs, the only thing to note with those is they don't have phantom power available on them. So if you were going to use like a gooseneck mic from a lectern or something like that, you'd have to inject phantom power from another source before you used it. That's the only thing to be mindful of, really. It's got its own built-in echo cancellation. There's an EQ in there, there's a fader in there, and then that all feeds into the matrix inside and the auto mixer as well. So you've got options for using different types of microphones and mixing and matching as well.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, it's a really versatile system. So I don't think there are any more questions in the chat, unless anyone has any last-minute questions. So if there are no more questions, I would just like to thank you, Mark, and the Yamaha team for putting this together today. We really appreciate your time and participation, and I found it really insightful, and I hope everyone on the call has too. Some great questions in the chat as well. If you have any further questions, feel free to contact me directly, or for those who are Amber customers as well, reach out to your account manager, and we'd be happy to help. Thanks again to everyone, and we are also having the same webinar at 2 o'clock if you feel like going through it again. And thanks again for all of your time this morning.
Yeah, thanks very much, Michael, and yeah, thanks to everyone for attending. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Mark.